Fear, it's something we all experience. Fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of the unknown. But what if I told you that fear is not something to be avoided, but something to be mastered? The ancient Stoics, philosophers like Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, and Epictetus, had powerful insights on how to conquer fear. Today I'm going to share with you how Stoicism teaches us to overcome fear and live with courage. Fear is not an objective reality, but a perception shaped entirely by our thoughts, interpretations, and beliefs. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus famously stated, "Men are disturbed not by things, but by the view they take of them." In other words, fear does not arise from external events themselves, but from the way we interpret those events. Two people can face the same situation, whether it be public speaking, failure, or uncertainty, and yet respond in completely different ways. One may see it as an opportunity to grow, while the other views it as a threat. The difference is not in the situation itself, but in the mindset each person brings to it. Our fears are often built on exaggerations, assumptions, and imagined worst-case scenarios that our minds construct. When we assume the worst, we allow fear to take hold and dictate our actions. But what if we paused and questioned our fears? What if instead of blindly accepting them, we examined whether they were based on reality or just mental distortions? The truth is, much of what we fear never actually happens, and even when difficulties arise, they are rarely as catastrophic as we imagine. Understanding that fear is merely an opinion, not an unchangeable truth, gives us the power to alter our perspective. When we recognize that fear is a mental construct, we can begin to replace irrational thoughts with more rational ones. Instead of thinking, "This challenge is too much for me," we can tell ourselves, "This is difficult, but I have handled challenges before, and I can handle this too." By shifting the way we see fear, we take back control. Instead of being prisoners to our own anxieties, we become masters of our responses. Fear does not have to rule our lives. It is only as powerful as the meaning we give it. One of the most powerful Stoic principles for overcoming fear is learning to distinguish between what is within our control and what is not. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher, frequently reminded himself of this truth, writing in his meditations, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." When we truly grasp this idea, we can free ourselves from much of the unnecessary worry and fear that consume our minds. Fear often arises from uncertainty, from obsessing over possible outcomes, and from attempting to control things that are simply beyond our reach. Consider how much time and energy we waste fearing things that are out of our hands, other people's opinions, the economy, the passage of time, or the outcome of events we cannot influence. Worrying about these things only drains us, creating stress and anxiety without offering any real benefit. Instead, the Stoics teach us to direct our focus inward, toward what we can control, our thoughts, our actions, our attitudes, and our responses to life's challenges. When we shift our attention to what is within our power, we regain a sense of agency and peace. For example, if you fear failing in a job interview, you cannot control the employer's decision, but you can control how well you prepare, how you present yourself, and how you respond to the outcome, whether good or bad. If you fear rejection in relationships, you cannot force someone to like you, but you can control how authentically you show up and how you handle the situation with dignity. By focusing on our own efforts, rather than external outcomes, we free ourselves from the paralysis of fear and instead take meaningful action. The moment we accept that some things are simply beyond our influence, we begin to experience a deep sense of relief. The weight of unnecessary worry lifts, and we realize that our job is not to control the universe, but to master ourselves. As Epictetus put it, freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control. True power comes from this realization. If we can control it, we take action. If we cannot, we let it go. Fear diminishes when we stop clinging to what is outside our grasp and start mastering what is within us. One of the greatest truths about fear is that it exists primarily in our minds, not in reality. The Stoic philosopher Seneca wisely observed, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." This means that most of the fear, anxiety, and stress we experience are not caused by actual events, but by the worst-case scenarios we create in our heads. We often anticipate failure, embarrassment, or disaster before it even happens, allowing fear to paralyze us before we've even taken a single step. Yet when we finally confront what we fear, we usually realize that it is far less terrifying than we imagined. Fear thrives in avoidance. The more we run from it, the more powerful it becomes. When we refuse to face our fears, they grow larger in our minds, taking on a life of their own. However, the moment we confront them directly, we take away their power. Think about a time when you dreaded doing something, perhaps speaking in public, starting a new job, or having a difficult conversation. Beforehand, your mind may have been filled with anxious thoughts. What if I fail? What if people judge me? What if I embarrass myself? But once you finally did it, you likely realized that it wasn't nearly as bad as you expected. In fact, you may have even felt a sense of relief and confidence afterward. The Stoics understood that fear is often just an illusion, a trick our minds play on us. The only way to dissolve that illusion is to confront it head-on. By taking action despite our fears, we develop resilience and prove to ourselves that we are capable. The more we do this, the more we weaken fear's grip over our lives. If something makes us afraid, that is often a sign that it is something worth doing. As Seneca also said, "A ship is safe in harbor, but that's not what ships are for." Life is not meant to be spent hiding from challenges, it is meant to be lived with courage. By facing our fears directly, we transform them from barriers into stepping stones. We stop being prisoners to our own anxieties and instead become people who embrace challenges as opportunities for growth. So, whatever fear is holding you back today, step toward it, not away from it. The moment you do, you will realize that it was never as powerful as it seemed. The Stoics understood that fear often arises from discomfort, whether it be physical discomfort, emotional distress, or the fear of the unknown. Their solution: train for adversity before it arrives. Instead of waiting for hardship to strike and hoping to handle it well, they believed in deliberately exposing themselves to discomfort so that when real challenges arose, they would be prepared. This practice, known as voluntary discomfort, is a way of strengthening both the mind and body to become more resilient in the face of fear. Seneca, one of the great Stoic philosophers, advised practicing poverty by periodically eating simple, meager meals and wearing rough clothing. His reasoning was not to punish himself, but to remind himself that he could endure hardship if necessary. By voluntarily experiencing discomfort, he trained his mind to realize that what people fear, poverty, hunger, or hardship, is often not as unbearable as they imagine. Similarly, Epictetus, who was born into slavery, taught that true freedom comes from mastering one's own mind and desires. He encouraged people to detach from luxury and comfort so that they would not become dependent on them. In our modern world, we may not need to wear rags or sleep on the floor, but we can still apply voluntary discomfort in our daily lives. Taking cold showers, fasting for short periods, exercising beyond our comfort zone, or challenging ourselves to speak in front of an audience are all ways to train our resilience. Each time we willingly expose ourselves to discomfort, we strengthen our ability to endure difficulty without fear. We learn that we are stronger than we think, and we develop confidence in our ability to handle life's inevitable challenges. Fear often stems from uncertainty. What if I lose my job? What if I fail? What if I experience hardship? But when we regularly push ourselves outside our comfort zones, we eliminate that uncertainty. We have already faced discomfort, and we know we can handle it. By practicing voluntary discomfort, we gain control over our fears, instead of allowing them to control us. The key lesson from the Stoics is this: do not seek comfort, seek strength. The more you expose yourself to manageable difficulty, the less fear will have a hold on you. When the real storms of life come, you will not be shaken, because you have already trained for them. Fear thrives on uncertainty. The more we resist thinking about what could go wrong, the more power fear has over us. The Stoics, however, took the opposite approach. They embraced the possibility of failure, hardship and loss before they even happened. One of their most effective strategies for overcoming fear was to accept the worst-case scenario in any situation. Instead of avoiding the thought of failure, they would confront it head-on, asking themselves, what's the worst that could happen, and mentally preparing for it. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher, practiced this method in his own life. Rather than allowing anxiety to cloud his mind, he would calmly consider the worst possible outcome of any challenge. Could he lose a battle? Could he lose his wealth? Could he even lose his life? If so, how would he endure it? By mentally preparing himself, he stripped fear of its power, because he had already accepted its possibility. Seneca took a similar approach, advising, "He robs present ills of their power, who has perceived their coming beforehand." In other words, once we have acknowledged and accepted the worst that could happen, we free ourselves from the fear of it. Imagine you are terrified of failing a major exam, losing a job, or being rejected by someone you admire. Instead of letting fear control you, take a moment to consider, what if the worst happens? What if you do fail the exam? What if you do lose your job? What if you are rejected? Would it be the end of the world? Or could you recover, adapt, and move forward? The reality is that even the worst-case scenarios we fear are rarely as catastrophic as we imagine. More often than not, we are stronger than we think, and we can handle far more than we give ourselves credit for. By accepting the worst-case scenario, we are not inviting failure, but rather preparing ourselves mentally and emotionally. Fear loses its grip when we realize that, even in the worst circumstances, life goes on. We can rebuild, learn, and grow from setbacks. Epictetus put it simply, if it is endurable, then endure it. Stop complaining. This mindset allows us to approach challenges with courage, rather than fear, knowing that whatever happens, we will find a way forward. So, the next time fear creeps in, don't push the worst-case scenario away. Face it. Ask yourself what the absolute worst outcome could be, accept it, and prepare for it. You'll find that once you do, fear no longer has the power to paralyze you. Instead, you will move forward with clarity, strength, and resilience. One of the most powerful Stoic techniques for overcoming fear is premeditatio malorum, or negative visualization. This practice involves deliberately imagining potential difficulties, setbacks, or hardships before they happen, not to dwell on them or cause unnecessary worry, but to mentally prepare for them. The Stoics understood that most fear comes from uncertainty and surprise, and by anticipating challenges in advance, we can weaken their impact and respond to them with resilience. Seneca, one of the great Stoic philosophers, encouraged people to regularly envision possible misfortunes in life. He advised, everyone approaches a danger with more courage if he has prepared in advance for the event. If we take time to visualize obstacles ahead of time, we won't be caught off guard when they arise. Instead of reacting with panic, we can respond with clarity and strength, having already considered how to handle the situation. Marcus Aurelius, as Emperor of Rome, applied this principle in his leadership. He would begin each day by reminding himself that he would encounter selfish, ungrateful, and dishonest people. Rather than being shocked or frustrated by them, he was mentally prepared, allowing him to approach difficulties with patience and wisdom. This method can be applied to all areas of life. If you fear failing an exam, losing a job, or facing a tough conversation, take a moment to imagine the situation unfolding. What would you do? How would you respond? By thinking it through in advance, you develop a plan and strengthen your ability to remain calm under pressure. Negative visualization is not about pessimism or expecting the worst. It is about building mental toughness. It trains us to detach from fear because we have already seen the challenge in our minds and accepted its possibility. More importantly, it shifts our mindset from fear to preparation. When a pilot flies a plane, they don't just hope for good weather, they prepare for turbulence. Likewise, in life we must not only hope for the best, but also prepare for adversity. By regularly practicing premeditatio malorum, we train ourselves to be ready for whatever life throws at us. When challenges come, instead of being overwhelmed, we will be able to say, I expected this, I am prepared. And when fear loses the element of surprise, it loses its power over us entirely. Fear is often misunderstood. Most people see it as a warning sign to stop, retreat, or avoid the situation that is causing discomfort. However, the Stoics teach us to view fear not as a signal of danger, but as an opportunity for growth. Fear arises when we are stepping outside our comfort zones, stretching ourselves, and challenging our own limitations. Instead of avoiding it, we should recognize it as a sign that we are moving in the right direction. Marcus Aurelius, the great Stoic emperor, advised, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." In other words, what we fear is often the very thing that will help us grow stronger. Fear is not meant to stop us, it is meant to guide us. It points to areas where we have the most room for improvement. If we avoid what scares us, we remain stagnant. But if we face our fears head-on, we develop resilience, confidence, and wisdom. Think about any skill or achievement you have mastered in life. At one point, it probably scared you. Public speaking, taking on a leadership role, starting a new career, or even having difficult conversations, these all come with fear. But once we push through them, we emerge stronger. The fear that once seemed overwhelming fades away, and we look back, realizing that it was never as terrifying as we imagined. Every great leader, athlete and thinker has experienced fear, but what sets them apart is their willingness to embrace it as part of the journey. The Stoics teach us that adversity is a teacher. If something makes us uncomfortable, that is precisely the area where we need to grow. Seneca put it simply, difficulties strengthen the mind, as labor does the body. The more we engage with what challenges us, the more we develop courage and self-discipline. So instead of running from fear, ask yourself, what is this fear teaching me? What lesson is hidden behind this discomfort? What skills, strength, or wisdom will I gain if I push forward? By reframing fear as an opportunity rather than an obstacle, we transform it from something that holds us back into something that propels us forward. Each time we conquer fear, we step closer to becoming the person we are meant to be. The Stoics believed that true strength does not come from external circumstances, wealth, or status. It comes from within. They taught that the foundation of a fearless life is built upon virtue, which consists of 4 key pillars: courage, wisdom, justice, and self-discipline. When we cultivate these virtues, we develop an inner fortitude that allows us to face any fear with clarity and confidence. Instead of being controlled by fear, we become anchored in principles that guide us through life's challenges. Courage is the ability to act despite fear. It does not mean the absence of fear, but rather the willingness to do what is right even when fear is present. The Stoics remind us that fear is natural, but it should never be the deciding factor in our actions. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Courage is not just about facing external dangers, it is about standing firm in our beliefs, making difficult choices, and persisting through adversity. When we practice courage daily, fear begins to lose its grip over us. Wisdom helps us see fear for what it truly is, an illusion created by our minds. Many of the things we fear are based on assumptions or exaggerated thoughts rather than reality. Wisdom allows us to pause, analyze our fears, and respond with reason rather than panic. Seneca said, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." When we develop wisdom, we learn to question our fears. Is this truly dangerous, or is my mind creating unnecessary anxiety? By applying reason, we shrink fear down to its actual size. Justice is the virtue of doing what is right, regardless of fear. The Stoics believed that we should always act in accordance with what is fair, honorable, and just, even when it is difficult. This means standing up for our values, helping others, and making ethical decisions, even when they are unpopular. Fear often arises when we worry about how others perceive us or about the consequences of standing firm in our principles. But when we are guided by justice, we no longer let fear dictate our choices. We choose integrity over comfort. Self-discipline gives us control over our emotions and reactions. Many fears arise because we lack control over our impulses: fear of failure, fear of rejection, or fear of discomfort. But when we train ourselves to be disciplined, we build resilience against these fears. Epictetus taught that we should focus only on what is within our power, our thoughts, actions, and responses. When we master self-discipline, we do not allow fear to push us into rash decisions or hold us back from growth. Instead, we calmly face challenges and push forward with purpose. By cultivating these four virtues, we build a mindset that fear cannot shake. We become grounded in principles rather than emotions. Instead of reacting to fear, we rely on courage to move forward, wisdom to see clearly, justice to act rightly, and self-discipline to remain steady. A person who lives by these virtues is like a mighty tree with deep roots. No storm can uproot them. When we make virtue our foundation, we realize that fear is nothing more than a passing wind, incapable of moving us from the path we have chosen. The way we speak to ourselves, our inner dialogue, has a powerful influence on how we experience fear. The Stoics understood that our thoughts shape our emotions, and our emotions shape our actions. If we allow negative, fearful thoughts to dominate our minds, we will be controlled by fear. However, if we take control of our inner dialogue and reframe our thinking, we can transform fear into strength. Marcus Aurelius, in his Meditations, wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." This means that while we cannot always control what happens to us, we can control how we interpret it. Fear often arises from self-defeating thoughts such as, "I can't do this," "This is too much for me," or "What if I fail?" But these are just stories we tell ourselves. If we change the story, we change our experience. Instead of saying, "I can't handle this," tell yourself, "This is difficult, but I will grow stronger because of it." Instead of thinking, "What if I fail?" remind yourself, "Even if I fail, I will learn and improve." The Stoics were masters of reframing negative thoughts into empowering ones. Epictetus taught that events themselves do not disturb us. It is our interpretation of them that causes distress. If we see a situation as a disaster, we will feel fear. But if we see it as an opportunity for growth, we will feel courage instead. The key is to become aware of our inner dialogue and challenge the thoughts that fuel fear. For example, imagine you are about to give a speech, and fear begins to creep in. Instead of letting your mind spiral into thoughts like, "I'm going to embarrass myself," or "Everyone will judge me," pause and reframe. Tell yourself, "This is a chance to grow. Even if I stumble, I will improve. And no matter what happens, I will walk away stronger." By consciously shifting your mindset, you weaken fear's hold on you. Self-discipline plays a key role in mastering our inner dialogue. Just as an athlete trains their body, we must train our minds to speak to ourselves with strength and wisdom. When fear arises, take a moment to step back and examine your thoughts. Are they based on reality, or are they exaggerated fears? Are they pushing you forward, or are they holding you back? Once you recognize unhelpful thoughts, replace them with thoughts that empower you. Over time, this practice builds mental resilience. The more we take control of our inner dialogue, the less fear can influence us. Instead of being victims of our thoughts, we become their masters. And when we master our thoughts, we master our fear. One of the greatest sources of fear is our attachment to outcomes. We worry about whether we will succeed or fail, be accepted or rejected, win or lose. This attachment creates anxiety because we tie our self-worth to results that are often beyond our control. The Stoics teach us a different way: detach from the outcome and focus on what is within our power, our effort, our mindset, and our actions. Epictetus put it clearly: some things are up to us, and some things are not. The outcome of a situation, whether you get the job, win the competition, or receive praise from others, is not fully in your control. What is in your control is how much effort you put in, how well you prepare, and how you respond to challenges. When we become too focused on results, we create unnecessary fear. But when we focus only on what we can control, we find freedom. Imagine you are preparing for an important exam or presentation. If you keep thinking, "I have to pass," or "I must impress everyone," fear will take over because you are focusing on an uncertain outcome. Instead, shift your focus to the process. "I will study as best as I can. I will give my full effort, and no matter what happens, I will learn from this experience." By letting go of the need for a specific result, you remove the pressure that fuels fear. Marcus Aurelius embodied this mindset in his leadership. As emperor, he could not control whether Rome would always prosper or whether people would approve of his decisions. What he could control was his dedication to being a just and wise leader. He focused on his duty rather than worrying about how history would judge him. This detachment from outcome allowed him to lead with clarity and courage. Detaching from outcomes does not mean we stop caring or give up. It means we do our best without letting success or failure define us. Seneca wrote, "Do your duty and let the results take care of themselves." When we release the fear of what might happen, we can fully engage in the present moment. We stop hesitating, we take action, and we give our all, without the weight of expectation crushing us. Fear loses its power when we stop measuring ourselves by external results. Instead of worrying about whether things will go our way, we learn to embrace whatever happens with resilience. True success lies not in the outcome, but in the courage to show up, give our best, and grow from the experience. The Stoic principle of memento mori, or remember that you will die, is not meant to be a depressing thought. It is meant to be a liberating one. It is a reminder that life is finite, that time is our most valuable resource, and that we should not waste it on fear, hesitation, or trivial worries. When we truly understand that we will die one day, we gain clarity about what truly matters, and we stop allowing fear to control us. Marcus Aurelius frequently meditated on mortality, writing in Meditations, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." This was not a call to despair, but a call to urgency and purpose. When we remember that our days are limited, we stop fearing rejection, failure, or embarrassment. We realize that most of the things we worry about, what others think of us, whether we are good enough, or whether we succeed in every attempt, are insignificant in the grand scheme of life. Imagine standing at the end of your life, looking back. Would you regret taking bold action, even if it didn't work out, or would you regret letting fear hold you back from living fully? The truth is, when we acknowledge our mortality, we are freed from the weight of unnecessary fears. We stop overthinking and start acting. We stop waiting for the perfect moment and start pursuing what truly matters to us. Seneca wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." Fear is one of the biggest thieves of time. How many moments have been lost to worry about things that never happened? How many opportunities have been passed up because of fear of failure? How many relationships have suffered because of fear of vulnerability? When we remind ourselves that life is short, we realize that the greatest risk is not taking risks at all. Memento mori is not about fearing death. It is about using the awareness of death to live more fully, more bravely, and more meaningfully. When we recognize that our time is limited, we stop sweating the small stuff. We stop fearing judgment. We stop procrastinating. Instead, we focus on what truly matters, acting with courage, embracing challenges, and living in alignment with our values. So whenever fear holds you back, remember this: one day, you will no longer have the chance to act. Do not let fear rob you of life's opportunities. Embrace each day with purpose, knowing that the only true failure is to have lived in fear rather than in action. Fear has a way of paralyzing us, making us hesitate, overthink, and delay what we know we need to do. But the Stoics understood a fundamental truth: the only way to overcome fear is to take action in spite of it. Seneca, one of the great Stoic philosophers, famously said, "He who is brave is free." This means that courage, not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act despite it, is the key to personal freedom. The more we allow fear to dictate our choices, the more we become prisoners of it. But when we choose to act, we reclaim our power. Many people wait for fear to disappear before they take action, believing that courage means feeling no fear at all. But this is a mistake. Even the bravest people in history, great warriors, leaders and thinkers, felt fear. The difference was that they acted anyway. The Stoics knew that courage is a muscle, and like any muscle, it grows through use. The more we push ourselves to step forward despite our fear, the weaker fear's grip on us becomes. Marcus Aurelius, in Meditations, reminded himself, "Do what nature demands, get on with it, if you have the means." In other words, when you know what needs to be done, do it. Do not let fear delay you, do not let overthinking trap you, and do not let doubt hold you back. Every time we hesitate, we reinforce fear's control over us. Every time we act, we weaken fear's influence and strengthen our own confidence. Think about any fear you have: public speaking, starting a new career, pursuing a difficult goal. The first step is always the hardest, but once you take it, fear begins to fade. Imagine standing at the edge of a cold pool. The longer you stand there, dreading the shock of the water, the harder it becomes to jump in. But the moment you take the plunge, you realize it wasn't as bad as you imagined. Fear is the same way. It grows in hesitation and shrinks in action. The Stoics believed in action. Epictetus advised, "Don't explain your philosophy, embody it." You can read about overcoming fear, you can think about it, you can plan, but ultimately, it is action that makes the difference. No amount of preparation can replace doing. If you fear failure, take action. If you fear judgment, take action. If you fear uncertainty, take action. The more you do, the less fear controls you. Courage is a choice, not a feeling. The more you choose it, the freer you become. And with each step forward, fear loses its power, until one day, you look back and realize that it was never as strong as you once believed. Fear is often seen as something negative, something to avoid, suppress or escape. But the Stoics took a different approach. They believed that fear is not an enemy, but a teacher. Every fear carries a lesson, and instead of running from it, we should ask ourselves, what can I learn from this? Marcus Aurelius, in Meditations, wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." This means that the very thing we fear, the challenge, the obstacle, the uncertainty, is what forces us to grow. If we can shift our perspective and see fear as an opportunity for self-improvement rather than a barrier, we take away its power over us. Think about the things you fear most. Are you afraid of failure? That fear teaches you that you deeply care about your goals, but it also reveals areas where you need more preparation or resilience. Are you afraid of rejection? That fear shows you that you value connection, but it also invites you to build inner confidence and self-worth. Are you afraid of the unknown? That fear pushes you to develop adaptability and trust in your ability to handle whatever comes your way. Seneca reminded us that difficulties strengthen the mind, as labor does the body. Just as a muscle grows stronger when it is challenged, so too does our character when we face our fears. If we always avoid what scares us, we remain weak and untested. But if we lean into our fears, analyze them, and learn from them, we emerge wiser and more resilient. Instead of letting fear paralyze you, turn it into a source of wisdom. The next time you feel afraid, don't immediately push the feeling away. Instead, pause and reflect. What is this fear trying to teach me? What skill, mindset, or strength do I need to develop in order to overcome it? By doing this, you shift from being controlled by fear to using it as a tool for personal growth. The Stoics did not believe in avoiding discomfort. They believed in embracing it as a means of becoming stronger. Fear is simply a signal that there is something to learn, something to improve, something to confront. If we change our mindset and welcome fear as a teacher, we turn every moment of doubt into an opportunity for transformation. And in doing so, we take another step toward mastering not just fear, but ourselves. Fear thrives in the future. It feeds on uncertainty, on what-ifs, on worst-case scenarios that may never happen. When we allow our minds to drift too far ahead, we create fear out of possibilities rather than reality. The Stoics understood this well, which is why they emphasized the power of focusing on the present moment. Right now, in this very moment, you are okay. And if you stay grounded in the present, fear loses its grip on you. Marcus Aurelius in Meditations wrote, "Confine yourself to the present." This simple yet profound statement reminds us that most of our suffering comes not from the present, but from our anticipation of what might happen. We worry about failing an exam, being rejected, losing something important, but none of these things are happening right now. At this moment, you have everything you need to take the next step. Fear only grows when we project ourselves into an uncertain future. Consider how many times fear has held you back, not because something bad actually happened, but because you imagined it might. You worried about an interview, but when the moment came, you handled it. You feared public speaking, but once you started talking, you were fine. You hesitated to take a risk, but when you finally did, it wasn't as terrifying as you thought. Fear is often nothing more than a shadow cast by an imagined future. The present moment is always manageable. Epictetus taught that we should not waste energy fearing things that haven't happened yet. He advised, don't demand that things happen as you wish, but wish that they happen as they do. This means accepting life as it unfolds, moment by moment, instead of fearing an uncertain future. By bringing our focus back to what is here and now, we regain control. We stop worrying about what might happen, and instead focus on what we can do right now. A practical way to return to the present moment is through mindfulness. When fear starts creeping in, pause, take a deep breath. Observe your surroundings, feel your feet on the ground. Ask yourself, is there a real danger right now, or is my mind creating one? More often than not, you will realize that in this moment, you are safe, you are capable, you are in control. Fear loses its power when we refuse to live in an imaginary future. By anchoring ourselves in the now, we break free from the chains of worry. So, when fear arises, don't fight it, just bring yourself back to the present. In this moment, you are stronger than you think. And in this moment, fear has no power over you. Fear often arises from self-doubt, the belief that we are not strong enough, not capable enough, not prepared enough to handle the challenges ahead. But the truth is, you have already overcome so much in life. You have faced difficulties, endured hardships, and come out stronger on the other side. The Stoics remind us to trust in ourselves and our resilience, for we are always stronger than our fears. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." This means that no matter what happens in life, you have control over your response. You have the ability to endure, to adapt, and to grow. When fear tries to convince you that you are weak, remind yourself of everything you have already faced and overcome. There were times in the past when you felt afraid, uncertain, or even hopeless, yet you made it through. Why would this time be any different? Seneca taught that we are often stronger than we believe. He said, "We are more often frightened than hurt, and we suffer more in imagination than in reality." This means that most of our fears are illusions, created by our minds rather than actual threats. The worst-case scenario we imagine is rarely as bad as we think, and even when challenges do arise, we almost always find a way through them. You are far more capable than your fear wants you to believe. Trusting yourself does not mean pretending to be fearless. It means recognizing that you can handle fear when it arises. Fear may always be there, whispering doubts, but you do not have to listen. Instead, remind yourself, "I have faced challenges before, and I will face this one too. I may not have all the answers now, but I will figure it out. I am resilient, I am capable, and I will grow from this experience." One of the greatest Stoic lessons is that we become what we repeatedly do. If you repeatedly avoid challenges, fear will grow. But if you repeatedly face them, even when afraid, your courage and confidence will strengthen. Every time you act despite fear, you are proving to yourself that you are stronger than you think. So, the next time fear tries to stop you, remember, you have already survived so much. You have the strength, the wisdom, and the resilience to face whatever comes next. Fear is not your enemy, it is your training ground. Every moment of doubt, every hesitation, every obstacle is an opportunity to grow stronger, wiser, and braver. The Stoics did not seek to eliminate fear, but to master it, to walk forward despite it, to use it as fuel rather than a barrier. And so can you. You are not defined by your fears, you are defined by the actions you take in spite of them. Trust in your resilience, embrace challenges, and remind yourself that you have everything you need within you. The only thing standing between you and the life you want is the courage to take the next step. So take it. Stand tall, move forward, and become the fearless person you were always meant to be. Trust yourself. Trust your ability to adapt. Trust that no matter what happens, you will rise again, because you always have.